Good evening, and welcome to another edition of the Tom Murphy Show. Tonight, we're fortunate enough to have on our program a familiar face in the village of Mamaroneck, Trustee Ilissa Miller, who will be leaving the board, unfortunately, coming this December is the end of your term, right?
Absolutely.
You've
Yeah.
just served 2 terms
I did.
in the village of Mamaroneck.
4 years.
And that's a worthy service. That's a time-consuming and very absorbing duty.
Yes, particularly in the village of Mamaroneck, we have a lot of hotbed issues, a lot of items that are going on, from flooding to development. A lot of very interesting items that do require attention. And unfortunately, I ran out of time to be able to serve the community in the way that they deserve to be served.
Well, you only spread yourself so thin in this world,
Exactly.
and you've got a lot going on. Let's talk about some of your time on the board. What would you say were the most pressing issues?
Well, it depends, because each term was a bit different, but flooding was always at the top of the concerns. Parking, top of the concerns. Just, relative quality of life in the village, a big concern. And combine those, it's not just an easy fix when you're talking about development. So when I ran my original platform, I wanted to focus efforts on how we can build the industrial zone. Mm-hmm. And so we put together a plan, and we have a great leadership over there. So we have the Industrial Area Committee, and they've come up with some great initiatives to help revitalize that area, attract right types of businesses that will help supplement who we have already in place, and be able to grow that part of the village in a way that we've been able to grow Boston Post Road and Mamaroneck Avenue.
I actually had them on the show one night, Andy Spatz and John Verney, and that is a neglected part of the village. And it was originally supposed to be a manufacturing zone, but as we know, there's very little manufacturing going on in the United States anymore.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to see, offices or some sort of development like that, which don't put a strain on the school but pay, taxes.
Absolutely. And there's opportunity there for shopping, for offices, for sporting facilities. And I know right now most of it is parking lots, but we can be creative. You could develop parking lots. You can, and still not
build over parking lots.
Absolutely, and not lose those parking spots. And there's room for different types of businesses and opportunities here in the village. There are vacancies, so nothing is perfect. So obviously we're looking to attract different types of businesses throughout the village, but you could see there's development also happening, especially in areas that have been quiet for a while.
I noticed there's the building going up on Boston Post Road by Delancey. That's been a vacant lot for a long, long time, where McGuire's used to be.
Yep, exactly.
So that's nice to see.
Yeah.
Where are we with the Army Corps of Engineer plan?
That's a great question. So the Army Corps project is currently being reviewed by the environmental, getting environmental assessments done, both by the state and the HCZMC is going to have to review that. I think it's a great initiative. I don't know all of the details, and I think that this village would do its residents a great interest if they offered an opportunity to educate the residents a bit more about what this is about. I think there is a lot of shroud of secrecy, for lack of better terms, around it, because there's a perception that the Army Corps of Engineers is not being accessible to the public, and they're the ones that have put this plan together and can present it the best. And so I think that we as a village should be putting together a communications program, reaching out to residents who may be affected, reaching out to residents all around who are going to be affected because of different potential developments that could happen, and detours that will put a strain on our village. It's going to impact us for a period of 3-5 years or so.
And then in perpetuity after that.
Absolutely, and it should help and improve things for us. However, what do we do in that interim? And we need to start planning for that now, and we need to start educating people about what to plan for now. We have all this development coming in. We're going to be doing, having a lot of traffic that's going to be
some
driving
coordination.
That. Absolutely, and there's, that's part of the bigger vision of, we talk about having a master plan for the village, but who really is responsible for overseeing and implementing that master plan? You know, a plan is just like, you know, any other kind of plan. You know, you hire an architect to do work on your house, then that plan that architect puts together is handed over to your contractor,
Right.
who brings in all the different people to work on that. And so, you know, if you look at a village plan, it's the same type of thing. You need to have an overarching architect of that plan or owner of that plan to make sure that there's a consistency through that. Obviously, we have HCZMC and our other zoning boards who do that, and that's their responsibility. But we also have issues in that we don't have communications around how this all ties in together. So that becomes, you know, the cycle that we see often in front of our board.
You know, I was a trustee in April 15th, 2007 during the huge flood that really affected so many people and damaged so many homes and put people out of their homes. So, you know, I'm a supporter of, you know, the idea of the Army Corps taking action. Yeah. But, you know, I think the biggest issue, and you hit on it, was there was a real lack of communication, both from the Army Corps, and I hate to criticize the village because I know how hard it is, but from the village officials didn't do a great job getting the word out, especially to people whose properties were going to be affected. And we don't want to have like a conflict between people whose properties have to be affected because of the you know, the plan and people who will benefit from the plan. You know, we should all be working together. You know, because when they had that presentation at the Emlyn, I was working that night, and I came, and I didn't come that late, but I got there, and the presentation was over, and people were just milling around. I was like, okay, maybe I got here too late. And then that weekend, I went to watch it on LMC-TV, and I sat down. I said, okay, I'm going to watch this, and it was 20 minutes long. And I was like, wait a minute, that's it? That you know, you're going to change the village forever, and that's all the information you're giving us? And it just seemed too quick and too condensed. You know.
Part of having public meetings and town hall meetings and discussions is that public discourse. Democracy enables people to have conversations. You don't always have to agree. But each one of us as community citizens and residents, we have different perspectives on these projects. And by not having a Q&A that was publicly available for everyone to hear, I think that they really cut off the legs, you know, to public discourse. Public discourse is what educates people. It spurs ideas for others. It encourages conversation.
And when people can't get their questions answered, they imagine the worst. Even if there's not and most of the time there isn't a nefarious intent, but they imagine a nefarious intent, especially when it comes to their largest investment, you know, their homes.
Absolutely.
But you know, I'm looking forward to something coming to fruition because the folks who are greatly affected by flooding, and you know, it affects us all. You know, if you can't get around a village because the village is flooded, it affects you. But you know, there are so many people whose lives were just devastated, and it was heartbreaking to be a trustee back then because you know, there was a limited amount you could actually do.
Absolutely.
And you know, there was so much need.
Yeah.
What are the other big development questions that are on the boiler?
So, well, development. There's a lot of there are challenges with development. The big challenge that we have as a community, again, it goes back to the master plan, is making sure that we as a village understand how we want to grow together. We have very limited opportunities for housing, for buildings, and for structures. So we can either grow up. Growing out is not so easy, but there are discussions taking place about how we can change the zoning code so that we can limit ways to grow out, so that you can limit ways to grow up. We did put on Boston Post Road, we did put a height restriction on Boston Post Road for buildings to encourage the right size buildings and to maintain the views of those behind. People buy into those homes for those views, so we want to be able to protect that. The same thing where you buy a piece of property for your home, you're cognizant of how far you are from your neighbors. If you build your home too wide, well then you're going to be too close to your neighbors. And as you can see in developments primarily down south, which are new developments, they have very large houses that are right next to each other. And that creates a different type of character for a village. And I think that those are some of the big challenges that we have in Mamaroneck as we're growing. How do you grow, but how do you maintain that character? I don't have the answers, but the answers are in the code at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's been my experience both in the village and in the town, is that when you wanted to change some of your zoning code, at first it seems like it's just going to be cut and dry and simple, but it's like one of those things that everything is interlocked. And when you pull out, what's that game, Jenga?
Yes,
when
exactly.
you pull out one of those blocks, you don't know how it's going to affect the whole tower. So it really should be taken slowly and with a lot of thought and a lot of consideration. And that's why you have meetings where people can come up and say, well, if you do this, this is how it's going to affect me. Because I've had that experience as a legislator where my mind has been changed by something,
Absolutely.
and I know it's happened to you, by something that people have said to me at the meeting. And I think that's the whole point of having public input.
Absolutely.
And you get a better product at the end of the day.
You do, and I think one of the things that I enjoyed most about being a public servant and representing the village is listening to what residents had to say, respecting their opinion. Sometimes it was harder than others. Being heard, is an art form. Being able to listen is another type of art form. And I really tried hard to hear everyone's different sides, not to have too much of a prejudged notion coming in. You have an idea going into a meeting of where you might want to be, but that idea should be molded based off of the discussion that you're having publicly, and it absolutely has taken place. Has it always been met with positivity? No, but that's okay.
You should be open to having your mind changed.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that your mind is going to change.
Absolutely.
And what I have found that if I listen to somebody and they tell me their view of it, and I tell them why I think that there's another better way, at least they feel like they've been listened to, and I have a reason for doing that. And and sometimes you got to say, "Hey, you're right. I didn't think of that, and let me sit back and think this over one more time," because there's nothing. I find in government when people say this has to be done right now, you have to get this done now.
Yeah.
It's always it doesn't, and we can do it later. We have a saying at work. You measure twice and you cut once.
Well, I have a new saying at my work, which is decisions require discussions. Everyone has a decision to make, but everyone's perception and the way that they approach those decisions are very unique to their own person. So you and I could, approach a decision from two very different angles. It makes me a better person and a better decision maker if we're having that discussion around it. And so we shouldn't be shying from discussions at all. We should actually be encouraging them, but also not having them go on and on, and we need to know where that balance is.
And the problem sometimes in the village is that it becomes so, personal and so, for the lack of a better word, nasty. And what I have found that, I might disagree with you on an issue, but you know what? If it doesn't get personal, it doesn't get nasty, there might be another day where we agree on an issue and we work together on something. I've had that experience.
Absolutely.
So you got to put things in perspective. And you're going to see each other in the grocery store. Your kids might end up marrying each other, and you're going to be at the wedding. You know what I mean? So you got to. We all have to live here together. This isn't Congress where you go back to Tennessee and I go back to Maine, and there's never any interaction.
But the issue is that because it's where people live, it's where they want to feel safe and want to feel empowered and most in control, they're the most passionate about that. And that passion comes through, in both, happiness as well as anger or frustration. And just like you are with, a spouse or a partner, you're going to get passionate in discussions that you may feel like you're not getting your way. And that's okay, but being respectful in that process is important.
Now, let's just quickly segue into what you do in your professional life. This is what you do kind of for a living, is communications. What's your company?
Yeah, so Miller Public Relations is my company. I founded it.
Miller.
It's lowercase I, capital M,
Okay.
Miller Public Relations. Or, like I like to say it, IM PR, and we do international marketing, public relations for global telecom and technology companies.
Okay.
And so we're now in 5 years in business, and we've got 26 people. We've got
Oh,
clients all
congratulations.
over the world. Yeah, we represent clients in Asia to Europe, all across the United States. Yeah, it's really, really.
So that's
honor.
part of why you can't continue too, because you travel a great deal.
Unfortunately, yes. And you know, as I mentioned earlier, the village deserves people to serve them in a way that they can give that time to look at the issues and to interact with them. And for instance, tomorrow night we have a meeting, and I'm off to Canada. Next week there's another meeting, and I'm off somewhere. So, you know, missing meetings is not something I'm proud of. I try to accommodate them, but the village deserves people who can be there.
Yeah.
It requires work.
It's about showing up. Yeah, it's true. Well, good for you for acknowledging that and you know, being honest about it. Let's just talk about there's been a lot of sturm and drang about these two referendum that are coming up. Can you just explain them a bit? One is about appointing to boards and commissions.
Yeah, so there's a lot of confusion out there about what these are. And this board, the majority of this board, I should say, thought that it was going to be in the best interest of our community to vote on whether or not appointments to boards, whether interim appointments or initial appointments, should be made solely by the mayor. There's a couple of issues there.
Let me stop you for a second.
Sure.
When I was on a board, that was a majority of the board decision.
Yes, something happened in about, I want to say, 2009, 2010 timeframe.
Okay, so that was after me and before you.
Yes, there was a change in the law, and the change was made during the current mayor's, you know, reign over the village here. And we call it a reign because sometimes it feels like that. While he's done really good things, this is one of the things that I think is anti what this village needs. When the village formed a village manager form of government, the idea was that the village manager would be the equivalent of the CEO, and the mayor would be the chairman of the board. And the chairman of the board helps to run meetings efficiently, helps to steer the board and the village in the right direction, and to be a true leader when it comes to being the mayor, being the spokesperson, and being out there in the face of the village. I think the mayor does a really good job of being the face of the village. I think as a leader, he crosses the line from time to time. He doesn't have a clear sense of what the majority of this village needs and should have. And therefore, there's an opportunity for him to take advantage of that. And when you can take advantage of things, you know, you can turn an almost $1 billion loss into no taxes for 18 to 20 years, right? You know, those are loopholes.
Well, you know what it comes down to too, in my taking, you know, the personalities out of it, is that, you know, you have a bunch of people elected, and they represent collectively a point of view.
Yes.
And that point of view, the majority of that point of view, should be represented in those appointments. Because, you know, if a person is pro or anti-development and they become mayor, and they get to appoint the people to those boards and commissions, which are very, you know, I used to always say I want to leave the board of trustees some days and get a position with real power. I want to go to zoning board.
Or the planning board, yeah.
And, you know, so if only one person, you only get in one person's point of view, because he's going to appoint like-minded people.
Exactly.
So those appointments do not reflect the majority of the board, which in theory, that majority of the board represents the majority of the voters out there.
Yes, and for those who know the importance of the majority of certain boards, and especially in the land use boards, and for a mayor who has sole discretion to appoint those, there are ways that you can orchestrate things to go into your own personal interest and favor. And so some of the things that we've seen over the past few years is a very well-adversed mayor who knew how to work the system. So prior to the organizational meetings, we would suddenly get resignations from the various land use boards so that he could unanimously appoint individuals to replace those positions, and therefore set it up for the next term that, oh, we don't need the board's blessing on this. It's the mayor's discretion, and this is what we are trying to stop, or trying to raise awareness of the village.
But if there's an open seat on a board, does he get to?
Right now, if there's an open seat on the land use boards, it's the mayor's sole discretion to put a replacement in that.
I'm not saying a replacement. What I'm saying is when a term expires.
When a term expires, it's the board has the ability to approve the person or not. If we
But it's
do
the mayor's
not,
appointment.
it's the mayor's appointment. If we do not approve that recommendation, then the original person is a holdover.
I got you.
And that holdover person can be there for years upon years upon years, perpetuating some of the same problems that you're hoping to fix, or hindering a village's ability to bring in fresh
that is a big
ideas.
change, because for years it was the majority of the board appointed the people to the land use commissions.
Exactly,
So that
yes.
is nominated and appointed.
Yes.
So that's a big change in how this village has been governed. So I could understand the desire to change that. And as you say, it really isn't just up to the Board of Trustees. Now it's at the voters.
Yeah, and I really listened hard to the residents of the village who came in who appeared confused about what this actually meant. And I really respect the fact that they support the mayor and they want to encourage the mayor to do right by the village. And that's terrific that they can come in and do so. But at the end of the day, that support should be done in the voting booth. They should go out and show their support in that manner. Having public discourse or hindering the village from having a greater decision through a referendum, I think is a disservice for everybody. And so that was why I was in grand support of this, because of the fact that it puts...
At the end of the day, the voters have the decision.
Absolutely.
Yes. It isn't something that the politicians did. And it always drives me crazy when you're on a local board and somebody calls you a politician.
Yep.
It's not like this is how we earn our living, and it's not like that this is what we grew up wanting to be.
Exactly.
It's just it's just something that a vocation, an avocation that we tended to feel that we were good at and we could help people with.
Well, yeah, or there's a sense of duty, that you serve your community in a way that everyone gives back. There's always that saying, it takes a community to raise a family, to raise a kid. It takes a village. Absolutely. Yeah.
Just let's talk about the other referendum for a minute. Now, there's another one about the village attorney. Now, this one I'm a little iffy on, but go let's see.
Yeah. So the idea here is very similar. And again, if you're going to do one, let's do the majority of these, right? And the village attorney.
But the mayor always appointed the village attorney.
Yes, and that's
with the approval of the board.
Yes, and that is still the case. What that does is it discourages discussions amongst the board to have various different discussions about critical matters that affect this village. When you have a mayor who has that much power over what the attorney can do, you are limiting the village's ability to protect itself. And when we look at what happens with lawsuits in the village and certain types of litigation that we've been encountering year after year, it's more challenging to bring on a third party or an expert in that matter when you have an appointed attorney that is dedicated to serving primarily the mayor, but then the rest of the board happens to be part of his duties as well.
Well, this is where, I have issue with this because the mayor, appoints the board, nominates the attorney, the board okays it, but he's then supposed to work for the whole board. He is not supposed to be the mayor's attorney. He's supposed to represent the village and the whole board. And when I was on a board, I understand the issue in spades. But when I was on a board, what we did was we took cases away from the village attorney and gave them to another attorney. And you're allowed to do that. You hire special counsel for things.
Yep. And we have.
And you have, but I think that's an effective tool, and it also it gets the village attorney's attention. It's Satchel Paige was a great pitcher in Major League Baseball, and he often stepped off the rubber, didn't throw over, just stepped off the rubber and just looked at the guy, and that would get the guy back. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Sometimes you gotta you got to throw one. You know what I mean?
You know, and I'm not saying that Charlie is a bad village attorney.
I don't even want to get. I don't even want to get
It's
into.
not a personal thing
I don't want to
at
get
all.
into this
It's
village
really
attorney, that village attorney.
it's
Just
the philosophy of having that flexibility and having that that comfort level that the person that you're bringing in to represent the village represents the entire village. The same reason why you want to be able to have appointees to the land use boards, you know, represent the majority of the village's interest
that
as well.
I really am. I mean, the land use boards are things I'm keyed into. But I mean, I could go both ways with the mayor thing.
I don't
with the
disagree
village
with you at all.
attorney, yeah.
I can totally go both ways on that too.
I don't know which way I'm going when I get in a booth on that one.
But again, you know, since we're putting these referendums out there, you know, let it be a voter's choice.
It's up to the voter.
Absolutely.
It's up to the voter,
yeah.
and that is part of the job of both sets of candidates running in
Absolutely,
November,
yes.
to make that case. And you and I have both run in the village of Mamaroneck, and you know, had communication and getting out and knocking on doors and making your case and going to debates are very important.
Absolutely.
And you know, I look forward to watching the 6 candidates. Who are, I know them all. They're all good people. You know, to have a spirited debate about this.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the village always. I'll tell you what. I like the town. I love the town, but the village is always interesting. It really is. It's
entertaining.
Well, it's entertaining, but also because it's not as homogenous as the town, you get more interesting issues. Yeah. And you get more interesting. I'm not going to say more interesting people, but you get more impassioned,
spirited
people,
yep.
and spirited.
Absolutely. Yep.
And there's part of me that misses that.
And I'll tell you that, but that's also what makes this village exciting and unique.
Yes.
Is that you have people who are spirited and passionate,
Yes.
who are bright,
It's
who
a
want
hoot.
to engage,
Yeah.
who care, and that's really an exciting part of this. And unfortunately, it can be construed as a negative. It can turn ugly, and it can become, a bad way to fester some of the issues. But it's okay to have discussions.
It is, and I know you didn't participate in this, but there's a lot of yelling back and forth on the board sometimes. It has to stop. It's not good for political discourse. It's not good for the public to see, and it doesn't help you make decisions that way.
Leadership is, a lot like, your parents or, people that you look up to who, what is that perception you want to give out to the world about who you are? And we have families, we have impressionable people. So, that's our duty.
Ilissa, thank you very much, and good luck in the future. And thanks for coming on here tonight. And we'll be seeing you around town.
All right, you got it.
This is good night until the next Tom Murphy Show. Take care.